I was away last weekend for a little anniversary trip to Santa Fe, and it was really nice. But the reality is that this is a transition season in the garden, and I've got so much work to do to move the old warm season things out to make room for the new cool season things. And I'm really, really excited about it. So I thought, as I was making my list today in my office about what it is that I need to do this weekend, I thought it might be really helpful to share that list with you so that you know what jobs you should be doing this weekend in your garden too. So let's go through that list together. The first thing that I need to do is to continue clearing out my garden beds. And I've been talking about clearing out all of this Bermuda grass that has really gotten the best of me in the garden this summer, but I'm starting to make quite a bit of progress. Even still, I have other things besides Bermuda grass growing, believe it or not, that need to be cleared out, like some of the spent flowers and some of the tomato plants and the pepper plants that are just no longer productive, and other things that just need to go, because if I don't get them out of the way, I'm not going to have time to direct sow seeds or to transplant seedlings into my garden for the fall, and then I will be behind and I won't get the productivity that I need. So I have to do some of the hard things, make some of the hard decisions, and just clear the beds. So that is job number one. Start clearing your garden beds of things that are spent or things that are just simply out of time because the show must go on. When I clear out my garden beds, if I see any diseases or pests present on those plants, they go straight to the garbage. Otherwise, that material is repurposed and never wasted. So if that material is disease and pest free, it's going to go to one of two places. Either it's going straight into my compost pile, where it can break down into fertile soil that I can then put back onto my beds the following season, or it's going into a big pile that I will use to shred, and I use that shredded garden material for mulch in my garden beds, and it will eventually break down into healthy soil as well. So I try to make sure that I am utilizing as much material as I can so that whatever grows from the soil goes back into the soil every season. That being said, everything that I'm clearing out of these beds is going to my compost pile, and I have made quite a mess for myself over here. I have piles already waiting to be shredded. I like to let those dry out for a few weeks first because I find that the green material tends to clog up my shredder a little bit, so I like to have it dried out. I've also got compost bins that need to be turned, so I have a couple that I think are close to ready, and I have one that just needs to be turned. So I'm going to be checking on my compost bins. I have a 3-bay compost system back here, so I have 2 of those bays that look like they are just about ready, so I'm going to be checking on that. The 3rd bay is one that's been topped off all through the summer season, so I just need to turn it and I need to top it with a little bit of mulch, water it in really well, and let it cook for the winter time. All of this material was plants last fall. It was tomato plants and sorghum plants and pepper plants and all sorts of different things that I just ran through my shredder, and I have been using it to top off my beds and to fill in areas in my paths that just need to have some wood chips. And this works so well, and it's absolutely free apart from some hard work from me to shred it. We have gotten so much great rain through the month of September, and that has been making the garden grow so fast, and it's been great, but it's also been making the weeds grow really fast. And I have to admit, I've been a little bit negligent with my weeds of the summer, just like with my Bermuda grass, and it is time to catch up. It's really important to take care of the weeds now before fall and winter really set in, because all of the seed pods are there and present and waiting to dry out and then fall to the soil. And I don't want them to plant themselves, because if I do, I'm going to pay for it next spring when they spring to life with winter rains and the warming spring temperatures. So I have to clear all of this out. I've got a serious problem with some silverleaf nightshades back here, and silverleaf nightshades will grow from a little tuber. They also have a seed pod on them, and they can just really take over the space. Unfortunately, they're really hard to pull by hand unless you have a nice sturdy pair of gloves on, because they are covered in prickles, and also a trowel or something that you can dig down and kind of pop those roots up out of the soil. So I'm going to be spending a little bit of time here in this section back by my fig trees to clear away all of the silverleaf nightshade, because I don't want those seeds setting, and then I can do the very next job in line. Like so many things, you have 2 jobs ahead of another job, and this is the case here. I need to refresh my wood chips, but first I have to clear the weeds. I shared a couple weeks ago that we had 2 trees that had to be removed. One was an overgrown and very old mesquite tree that was blown down in a strong thunderstorm, and the other was a really tall Italian cypress that was right up against our house and had gotten so big that it was causing damage. So we had both of those removed, and I had the arborist shred all of the wood from those trees and leave it in this huge pile right here. And I'm going to be using that in my garden paths to keep down the weeds over the coming seasons, and I have enough here to do my entire garden, which is about 1/4 of an acre under a wall. So I'm really excited about having all of this free material to be able to use in the garden. So that's the next thing I will do after I get done clearing all of those weeds out this weekend. I will be spreading some new wood chips down in my garden paths. I don't really grow many roses. The one behind me is a tombstone rose that grows over the arch of a fountain in my courtyard. And I also have a really old-fashioned crimson climbing rose that blooms one time every year, usually in late spring or early summer. That rose bush was planted here a very long time ago, probably by the original owner of this house. She built it in the 1960s, and she lived here up until about, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago. So she was pretty old when she left the house and the rose bush that she planted. So kind of in honor of her, I let this rose bush grow. It's pretty unruly. It's a little bit big for the space. It's probably not one that I would have chosen for this space, but since it's here and it's so old and established, I feel like it has deserved its spot here, so I will work with it. When I'm prepping my roses or my flowers for fall, there are a couple things that I do. One, for roses and for flowers, is to just give them a general all-purpose feed, and I will use a balanced fertilizer for that. And if you look at the front of the bag of fertilizer, if you see your numbers on the front, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium are what those 3 numbers are for. And with a balanced fertilizer, you're looking for those numbers to be close in value. So something like 10, 10, 10, or something close like that. That will do well for both roses and for flowers in general as a fall feeding. You can buy specialty rose food if you like, but you really don't have to spend the money on that. So just look at those 3 numbers and use what you have, or buy something new if you really want to. When it comes to pruning roses, generally you want to keep it super light in the fall. And that's because when you prune any plant, it stimulates a rush of new growth. And those tender green shoots are going to be more susceptible to frost damage as we head into our cooler season. So trim any dead or broken or diseased branches off of your rose bushes, but for heavier pruning and for shaping, you want to save that until early spring before bud break. That way your roses aren't as at risk of frost damage. So I'm going to be going through and fertilizing both of these roses that I have growing in my courtyard. I will look through them just to make sure I don't see any branches that need to go for sure. But in general, it will just be a feeding and just a very light pruning at most. Now that I have my beds cleared, I need to top them with a fresh layer of compost. So if I have enough of my own, which hopefully I do this season, I will add 2 to 3 inches to the top of every bed. I practice no-till gardening, which means apart from building my garden beds, I have not tilled them ever since. I may go in and aerate them with a pitchfork or a broad fork. If you have one of those, you can use that. I don't. I just use a pitchfork. But generally, I just spread the compost over the top, keep the irrigation on as I would normally. That way they are ready to plant. And I find after all of those hungry crops that I grew over the summertime, it really helps my fall garden do so much better if I refresh the soil. Now that I have my beds cleared, the debris taken away and categorized as to whether it will be composted, shredded, or trashed, I have my compost put onto my beds, I've got my weeds cleared and my wood wood chips down, it is time to put pencil to paper and make a plan for the fall and winter. If you haven't already done this, I think that it would be really helpful for you too. I will just take a plain piece of paper and a pencil and sketch out just a rough drawing of my garden beds. And I am no artist. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just needs to have some representation of actual shapes of my garden beds. And so once I do that, then I will kind of figure out what I want to place in each bed. I try to rotate crops and not grow them too many years in a row in each of the beds, because I find that it cuts down on pest pressure and also on diseases. So I will decide what I want in each bed, how many of each plant, and then that will tell me what I need to order or purchase in the form of seeds or seedlings. When you're sitting down to plan what you're going to plant or sow in your garden beds, it is a good idea to go through all of those seeds and take inventory on what you already have. So one of the things that I am challenging myself to this fall is trying to use the seeds that I already have and trying to make a plan that incorporates as many of them as I can before I go out and I purchase new things. And that's because I am a bit of a seed hoarder. I have got so many seeds. I'm so guilty of over ordering. I will get on to seed company websites and just get so excited about all of the new and different things that I want to try, and then I end up buying more of certain things, like how many varieties of cabbages or tomatoes or peppers or whatever do you really need? And so those seeds definitely will have less germination over time, and I don't want to waste them. So much like people do pantry challenges or freezer challenges to try to clear out the food that they have so that they can use it and not waste it, I'm trying to do that with some of my seeds. So I'm taking inventory of what I have, and I'm trying to refrain from purchasing any this fall. Now, I'm making no promises about spring, because I do have certain projects that I like to carry out, like trying new dwarf or miniature varieties for indoor or for raised bed or container gardening, because I think that's really helpful for you all. And I just really like trying to stay on top of what things are new and coming out and being developed. But this fall, I'm going to try to use as much as I can of my own seeds before I go order anything else. So that means making a plan and making a list and not getting too excited when I do go out to purchase. I noticed when I was looking at the weather forecast that it is supposed to just be in the low 80s for me over the next coming week. It's actually supposed to be in the 70s today, which is so amazing. It feels so good out here after such a hot summer. But one of the important jobs now that the temperatures are starting to shift is to adjust the irrigation. And this is really nice because it saves a lot of money too. If you have an irrigation timer or you're watering it by hand, you're not pouring so much water onto your garden when you don't need to. So plants are going to start needing less water as the temperatures fall. But with irrigation, the rule is that you want to change the frequency of irrigation and not the duration. So if you have your garden set up for watering twice a week for an hour or two each of those times, what you want to do instead is to keep the hour or two set and in place, but instead of doing it 2 days a week, just do it 1 day a week. So change the number of days, not the number of minutes or hours. And that's because you still need to continue deep watering for your plants to stay healthy and for establishing root systems as we go into the fall. Plant roots follow the water, so deep watering is really important and so much better for your plants overall than shallow watering. So those nice long periods of watering are going to make those plant roots go down deeper into the soil and seek that water, because the water is going to soak deep down into the soil. That's why when you look at watering recommendations for certain plants like tomatoes or trees or lettuce or what have you, that they will say water to a depth of 12 inches or water to a depth of 2 to 3 feet. And that's because you want it that deep so that those roots for that particular plant will go down that far. So if you're just watering shallowly and you're only watering to a depth of a few inches, leaves, those roots are lazy and they are just going to stay right there. And that will make them more susceptible to periods of drought because they are not deep enough in the soil. They're going to get dried out in that first few layers of soil, and they just are not going to be as resilient and robust as if you would water deeply. So this weekend, I'm going to be going through, checking my irrigation lines for any leaks or damage. I know that in my courtyard, I do have a leak. I saw it spraying up a couple nights ago, and I'm sure that's because of a pack rat that was chewing. A lot of those little critters will go for your irrigation lines and chew holes in them because they're thirsty and they are looking for water. So go through and check for any clogs or any damage, any holes, any leaks, and repair those as necessary, and then adjust your timing of your irrigation so that you are all set for fall and saving a little money on your water bill. One of the best parts of gardening is harvesting. So I'm going to be harvesting all of the pomegranates on this white Sonoran pomegranate behind me because they are ready. They have turned a really deep red color, and I noticed that the squirrel that's living in my wood pile right now is starting to really sniff around this tree, and I found one that was actually gnawed on one side. So they're ready. The critters know it, and so do I. So I'm going to be going through and just harvesting all of them on this tree. I'm going to be checking the other varieties. Pomegranates tend to get ripe, depending on the variety, between mid-August and late October. So just keep an eye on your pomegranate trees if you're growing them and see if they are ready. I've got a video all about harvesting pomegranates and when you know when they are ready to harvest, and I will link that below for you. Otherwise, I have got eggplants to harvest, I've got okra to harvest, I have tomatillos and tomatoes and some of those last minute summertime things that I've been growing, and so they are continuing to produce a little bit. So the ones that are still productive, I will have to make a decision on whether I will let them stay or whether they're in the way of progress for the fall garden. So hard decisions ahead for sure. Fall is such a great time for tackling projects. I have my shed yet to paint, but that is not on the agenda for this weekend. So we are all about trying to clear the beds and get everything ready for fall. I would love to know what you are planting this fall and what your plan is moving forward. If you have any special projects that you're excited about, please let me know those below. I love hearing about other people's gardens and what they are up to. Next week, you can look for a what I'm planting right now video. I took a little break from those during the really hot part of the summer as I was traveling a little bit, but now as we are back to a transition in seasons, it is time to start planting again. So I'm going to be doing one of those next week. If that would be helpful for you, make sure that you stay on the lookout for that. But for this weekend, these are the jobs that I am doing so that I can prep for planting all of those great seedlings and seeds in my garden. Thank you all so much for watching. I am Kara from So Arizona. Until next time, happy gardening.